Hello and welcome to the Miko Bits show, and I'm your host, Miko Bits, and today we have an exciting episode for you. It's with Jesus Rodriquez, who's the CEO and founder of IntoTheBlock, and we're going to learn a lot about blockchain and blockchain technology from Jesus, and he's very sophisticated on areas like big data and machine learning and a bunch of really very deep juicy technical topics. So, I'm very excited about it. If you're having trouble keeping up with Bitcoin, blockchain, and DeFi, you've come to the right place. This is the Miko Bits show. If you're interested in those topics and getting the leading minds of this blockchain space, then we do this show on a almost bi-weekly basis these days. So feel free to hit the subscribe button and let's just get right into it. So before we start the show, just want to state that this is an opinion show, so it is not intended to be investment advice. So anything that we talk about on the show, it's just us talking, and it should be, for your entertainment. So I guess without further ado, let's meet Jesus. So Jesus, great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I feel I won a bet or something.
Very good. I'm glad you don't feel like you lost a bet. So the first thing we like to talk about is kind of the latest news items, right? So I think the obvious one that's very easy is things like the Tesla buying 1.5 billion US dollars in Bitcoin. So that's kind of an easy thing to talk about. Other things to talk about, I think Filecoin seems to be on a tear. But, please, let me know some of your thoughts, or if you have additional news items to discuss, I'd love to hear it.
No, the Tesla one obviously dominated the news, and the impact of the market was was remarkable. I mean, we're seeing how much every time one of these companies allocate part of the treasury to Bitcoin in particular, and what's the impact on the market. And certainly Tesla set up a new high. About some things that I've been interested about. There have been some news about BlockFi today aiming at GBTC. That BlockFi is very impressive, the level of growth that they have put in together, and finally, having something that can compete with GBTC could be very healthy for the market.
Tell me specifically what that news item is. What did they do?
Yeah, I think that they're going to launch a Bitcoin trust, very similar to GBTC, and certainly they have a very unique angle with their retail client base and institutional client base that could, make it finally a non-zero-sum game.
Yeah, that's exciting. And obviously, my fund is invested in Celsius Network and their competitor, but it's great to see, and I think non-zero sum.
You're an investor in us?
Absolutely. And as full disclosure, we are an investor in IntoTheBlock, which is Jesus's company. So, obviously that doesn't change my perspective, and would love to kind of further interview you. So I guess, to me, getting right into it, I'd love to hear from you about what problem does IntoTheBlock solve?
Yeah, it's conceptually very simple. So the idea, the overarching idea about IntoTheBlock was to enable intelligence for crypto asset as a whole class. Now, how we came up with that, it was even more trivial. So in traditional capital markets, you're seeing a lot of movement from of funds allocated to traditional vehicles to more sort of machine learning intelligent vehicles. So, for instance, quant funds have been having a horrible 3 years, and you're seeing funds like AQR struggling, Renaissance, everybody's having a hard time, and still you see a lot of capital fluctuating from discretionary to quant. We're seeing a proliferation of robo advisors, automated insurance, things like that. So in crypto, being 100% digital asset class, you will think that's the only way this is going to go, right? All funds are going to be quant. There is going to be 300 million robo advisors. The problem is that the intelligence layer and analytics layer that you need to build those products is still very nascent. So the IntoTheBlock was created to solve that problem, to enable analytics and intelligence and discover new indicators that could better inform institutional and retail investors about the asset class. And now, after getting some traction and some validation of that model, we started building what is called intelligence services on top, that quant strategies and robo-advisory strategies on top of that analytics layer that is already using all the signals and intelligence that the underlying platform provides.
That's exciting. And I think that one of the things that I always like to talk about in the next segment is called the numbers. So, would love to understand the numbers. I think in most cases, people talk about traction and distribution, which I think you have, but I would also like to hear from you a little bit about like what your kind of performance numbers look like with respect to trades that are being made on top of your proprietary algorithms. So, I think, so I would love to hear some numbers and, how it's going.
Yeah, so think about again into the blog in two main divisions, analytics and what we call quant services, that is really intelligent strategies, and they both share the same underlying infrastructure. The analytics product has over 120 clients, including who is who in the crypto market, so exchanges like Binance, eToro, Bitstamp, Deribit, public websites like CoinMarketCap, CoinGecko, CryptoCompare, big
Amazing.
wallets like blockchain.com, Bitcoin.com, so a very large distribution.
Everybody.
And then on the quant side, that we there I need to I have some restrictions about what I can disclose, but we started building quant strategies based on predictive models or high frequency trading strategies on DeFi or yield generating strategies on DeFi. We have over nine figures in capital allocated to those strategies
Wow.
with across the board with very strong performance, anywhere from 20% to 40 something percent across the board, and some even higher, and continues to grow. So it's a fairly new effort, but the growth um, has been very solid. It's just a very frustrating exercise. Most of the ideas and strategies we build just fail because that's the nature of the business.
That's fascinating. So, but in terms of the growth, then, it sounds like you're talking about already nine figure, which I think is in crypto, that seems to be almost like the baseline, but it's still an eye popping set of numbers. So, I guess I'd love to kind of have you dig in a little bit there. In terms of your quant strategies, obviously it's proprietary. There's not a limit to what you can say, but I'd love to kind of get some of your commentary on strategies, things that you feel like won't work, things that do work, why they work, and what's novel or interesting about the crypto blockchain space.
Yeah, so in crypto is a new asset class. It's a new asset class with new fundamentals. And as an asset class, architecturally, might be the richest asset class in history, even though it's a handful of years old. Why? Because part of the behavior of this asset is recorded in public ledgers. And then you have that are accessible to everyone. And then you have all sorts of programmable behaviors like in protocols that you can understand. So from that perspective, you should that opens the door to sort of a new generation of quant strategies or intelligent strategies that we haven't seen in previous asset class. Of course, you can extrapolate a lot of the lessons that we learned building quant strategies for other asset classes using order books and derivative techniques and apply it to large cap crypto assets. But where the really exciting stuff happening is when you start looking for unique factors like signals at the blockchain level, high frequency trading strategies in DeFi. That is like going back to the world of dark pools and all that when high frequency trading was starting in traditional capital markets. I think that from that perspective, crypto opens the door to a new set of intelligent strategies that we haven't seen before. Now, what is even more exciting than that this is just going being a little bit more ambitious into the future, is that a lot of those strategies could become assets in and of itself, right? Because crypto is fully programmable. There is nothing preventing a highly frequency trading strategy to become a token that people allocate capital, just like we're seeing with passive vehicles with white earn. And at this point, you have this very interesting symbiosis between the intelligence that you're leveraging to create alpha or beta that could be retrofitted into the asset class itself and make it more intelligent, which I think is fascinating and also unique to crypto.
Yeah, that is fascinating. So I guess what I would love to kind of dig into is sort of your sources of inspiration. So, where do you look for inspiration, and how, what are the things that get you going these days?
So if you think about what we do, we live at the intersection of machine learning and artificial intelligence and crypto. That to me, and I'm not trying to be cheesy here, but to me, I couldn't imagine a better place to spend my days working on. So crypto is the first asset class of my generation. Probably it's going to be the last one that I'm going to see. And I have the theory that we're living in the golden era of machine learning and deep learning. I feel that almost every piece of software in the world is going to be rewritten with AI as a first class citizen. It's going to become like databases, like every software has to have it. So we're working at the intersection of those two areas. So things that inspire me every day is what the big AI labs in the world are doing, what Google is doing, what DeepMind, OpenAI, that these guys that are breaking barriers, like solving challenges that we thought that could be that were unsolvable a few years ago, like Go or protein folding or this type of things that we didn't think there were solutions for that, and now they are. Well, we live in what we do is try to take a lot of those techniques and apply it to crypto assets and capital markets, and just in a very narrow space. But a lot of these techniques they haven't been tested in capital markets, so it's a new frontier, and it's very inspirational to take a lot of those ideas and apply it to a new asset class.
So I think that this is maybe jumping a little bit in my sequence, but like it can't help to ask you is, what's the big idea? And I guess, you already kind of touched on it. So you've already touched on the rapid expansion and advancement of artificial intelligence technologies, but I would love to kind of get your vision and, how do you see this playing out, and what's the kind of 10-year horizon, how do you see this in the future?
Yeah, so there is this famous quote: we tend to overestimate what we do in 2 years and underestimate what we do in 10, right? So I'm really bad trying to forecast technology trends, but so I'll give you two answers to the question. One a little bit more futuristic and one a little bit more pragmatic. The pragmatic one, I think the tokenization of assets is going to be big. Like a couple of years ago, we all thought that what was called at the time security tokens or digital securities was going to be like the biggest thing. The market hasn't really taken off yet, but when it does, the level of opportunities like that could open is tremendous. Like we think DeFi is big today. Playing with crypto is nothing like what DeFi could be if we're playing with real assets, with real estate assets, with commodities, with a stock. Like the magnitude of the growth of actually applying real assets to product to mechanisms like DeFi, like NFTs and things like that is tremendous. So that's a very pragmatic thing that I think the market needs to wake up, and there are some regulatory hurdles to cross there. Then probably the more futuristic thing that I don't even know if it's possible. I just think it seems logical. I'm very sort of seduced by the idea of the intelligent crypto asset, and this idea of embedding intelligence in the form of programmable crypto assets. So imagine using an example of DeFi that you can go from having an AMM like Uniswap that does a 50-50 split of something to an AMM that will use market signals to readjust the right balance or
Yep.
something,
Yep.
or a lending platform that will use external factors and analysis to allocate the right borrow and supply amount to a specific protocol. So instead of using intelligence to discover alpha or beta in a specific protocol, what if we can actually embed it and we can have intelligent blockchains in the same way that Microsoft said that they have the intelligent cloud, right? What if we could have intelligence blockchains and then machine learning is embedded at the core of the infrastructure that we use every day?
Yeah, I think that's a bold vision and it's a very exciting one. I think the thing that's so funny is that, we in crypto we've been notoriously bad at naming things. And one of the names that floats around all the time is this concept of smart contracts, right? And of course
Which they're not smart.
no, smart contracts are not smart, right? There's no smartness to them at all. I mean, maybe the developers who make them are pretty smart, but I'd say the contracts themselves are pretty dumb. And I think that it's interesting what you're describing, right? Because I guess my question becomes, let's assume that there's more and more kind of artificial intelligence that's built in. Like, what are the kind of long-term implications of that? Like, what do you see happening as a function of this? Because I believe, for example, the thing that you were talking about is, if you talk about AMM and DeFi, right, it's an automated market maker, right? But if you actually look at what happens with market making in traditional finance, which I think you're very well spoken on, market making is kind of a art and a science, and it's a profession and it's a function, and people do it, right? And so the idea that you can fully automate it is maybe, I mean, there's some extent to which you can automate it, right? But the question becomes, what if it were a lot smarter, right? And still automated, right? So I guess I'd love to kind of hear from you on that. I know that their AMM is a frontier, and I know that the kind of, I know things like curve and the mathematical curves and these bonding curves, I think they're all rational, but I think that there are better ways to do it. So I'd love to hear your views.
Yeah, I think so when I look, for instance, at DeFi today, there are two trends that I think are here to stay in this first iteration of DeFi. One is lending and the other one is AMM. I think there are other things that are proliferating,
Yep.
and we'll see how they work. But those two, I don't think they're going away. Now, nobody disputes the innovation of AMMs. I think it triggered the momentum in DeFi that we're experiencing today. The same with protocols like Compound and things like that. But the protocols themselves, the logic of that is based on code that is fairly static and white papers that are fully documented. Imagine if you can transition from that to a living organism that could learn based on its own behavior and what's happening on chain and can evolve, right, based on the conditions of the market and all that. Like, we have an intelligent compound? Could we have an intelligent Uniswap? And I think from the evolutionary point of view, this is not even a question of if, it's a question of when and whether the infrastructure is supported, because that's it's happening across every single trend in technology, and I think crypto is just going to follow.
I think that what you're talking about is fascinating. And, I was an advisor with a company called Genetic Finance that was focused on these kind of evolutionary algorithms, right? So in a sense, like this, it's a sort of novel layer of machine learning that, enables evolution to transpire, right? So I think that combined with finance, right, is fascinating. And, I think I often use an evolutionary metaphor when I talk about DeFi and DeFi smart contracts, because when you look at this idea of total value locked, it's really almost like organisms seeking caloric energy, right? So you're seeing all of these behaviors. You're seeing vampirism, like you're seeing cannibalism, carnivorism, like you're seeing all these kinds of mechanisms where one contract will try to get energy from another contract, and you'll even see these kinds of like, homicidal events, right? For example, you can see things like flash lending, right? So flash lending kind of enables an actor to use one smart contract effectively against another contract to kind of extract extraordinary value, in the form of a flash loan exploit. So I guess what I'm saying is that, you can look at these large DeFi projects as being kind of big bags of energy, and that there's this competition to kind of trap energy, and I think in biology it's sort of in the form of calories, right? So I guess what you're describing is really interesting because the evolution aspect of it, once you add these things, can really be transformational.
Yeah, and so evolutionaries is one of the big schools of machine learning, right? Together with logic, together with the neural network, a school of thought. I think that's one of the trends. That there is an entire subsegment of deep learning that is devoted that is devoted to that. And when you think the whole thesis is, as you have an ecosystem with many agents that are competing or collaborating with each other, sort of knowledge of that environment sort of emerge. And you can think today in DeFi, we have arbitrage bots competing against each other all the time.
Yeah.
We being participants on that ecosystem. Well, it's not inconceivable that you can develop agents that just based on that behavior learn and become smarter about what trades to place based on different conditions, not discretely like we're doing now that we see a transaction on the mempool and we try to predict a behavior, but trying to forecast, multiple hours down the road of what's going to happen. And the same for lending, and the same for insurance, and the same for other type of protocols.
Yeah, this company I mentioned, Genetic Finance, that I was helping out, like the it's fascinating to see, because one of the hypotheses about their automated trading evolved bots were that they were effectively counter trading behavioral economics. So in a sense, you have these traders that are built by these genetic algorithms, right? And these bot traders are basically trading some alpha signal. But the alpha signal may be that there are people who are panic selling, or it may be that there are people. So these kinds of inherent behavioral economic fallacies, the flaws in the logic, some people call them things like freakonomics, I think cause these bots to actually have a consistent source of alpha, right? They can consistently mine against day traders who have emotions, and these things don't have emotions. I think the other theme that came up in conversations around evolutionary algorithms that I thought were fascinating for me is that there are these two different polarities of behavior that you can apply as a machine learning policy, one of which is called basically survival directed behavior, and then the other one becomes non-survival directed behavior. And what can happen is that you can actually get a benefit on the algorithm if you take certain moments in time where you disconnect the survival requirement, right? And so what you're allowing is for the network to play without worrying about being reaped, because the reaper is basically the mechanism that kills algorithms for underperforming, right? That's so the thing that's fascinating is that evolutionary algorithms scientists are playing with play itself, right? They're basically saying, well, you can't force these bots to always be under the gun and life or death, because what they'll do is they'll converge and they'll stick to a certain set of patterns and they won't invent new patterns. So you have to allow them to play sometimes. When you reach a certain point of like the network, you can get to this local minima, and then you can allow these bots to play, and then they'll invent new strategies. So it's a very interesting field.
So I was having this debate with one of our clients the other day. That he spent a lot of years as a highest executive in one of the top high frequency trading funds in the market, and now he's in crypto. And we were talking about how that world has, particularly DeFi, has changed the ecosystem compared to the HFT days. So if you think about what makes figuring out alpha algorithms for markets so difficult, is the fact that there is a behavior of those markets that you don't see. Every time you place a trade, there are market makers and all that are going to move against you and things like that. Yes. And you don't have access to that, so you need to estimate it. Well, in DeFi, it's all visible. It's all there.
Yes.
It's on-chain behavior. But that also opens the door to all sorts of things. So one of the arguments and debates that we were having is that now high frequency trading takes a connotation of price versus speed, because an arbitrage bot can actually see my transaction and how much I'm paying for it. They can try to front run me or compete with me just based on price, not only based on speed or intelligence. Well, is that a feature or a bug? Right? Is that a good thing or a mistake? And I think it's a feature. What that's forcing us to do is to reimagine the type of algorithms and strategies that we build in this space, and intelligence is certainly a component of it.
Yeah, and I think you rightly mentioned speed, right? Because obviously speed is very important. I mean, I was in a room with Sam Bankman Fried from Alameda Research, and I asked him this question about minor extractable value in so-called decentralized order books, because he's very interested in this with Solana and FTX and Serum and all these kind of projects he's working on. And in a sense, he was kind of like in the mood of outrunning the guy next to you as opposed to outrunning the bear, which is he basically said if you deliver fast enough performance, then the horizon of minor extractable value or MEV actually decreases, right? So it's a combination of intelligence and speed, right? Which I think it's sort of an interesting answer. It's not a satisfying mathematical answer, to be honest. It's not a blockchain answer. It's much more of a pragmatist answer. But I think it's subtle and it's interesting. So
And totally, I think speed is only one factor
it
of
is
the equations, right?
relevant
Like
though.
I think you can certainly create a lot of value or reduce a lot of value with a speed, but I think intelligence is sort of the next level up and complementary. In general, going back to bringing this full circle, I think that all these protocols are going to be, we're going to go from programmability and automation to intelligence. Is
Makes
You're
sense.
going to see an evolution into a lot of these protocols in which they take signals from the market, they learn, they self-evolve, and they become more intelligent as with their usage.
It feels like there are opportunities to launch kind of I think there's two new kind of classes of things that kind of get transformed by artificial intelligence in the DeFi space. I would say that the two novel things that get kind of transformed are one of them is these so-called smart contracts, right? Which is effectively that you get contracts that like smarter contracts, right? You get smart contracts and DeFi products that have intrinsic intelligence. And I think you mentioned AMM. I definitely think there's room for that there. But I think the other thing where you could see a role for some kind of AI would be in a DAO. So, I think with the decentralized autonomous organization, I know that there's certain national geographies whose legislators are looking at regulating DAOs as effectively legal persons, right? They're granting legal personhood to a DAO. And I think if they were to do that, then it's a very interesting thing to speculate on what that legal personhood would do if imbued with intelligence. So, and I think that the thing that I think the word governance right now is being used to describe things that cannot be automated, right?
Totally.
But I think the thing that's very interesting is that what if some of those things could be automated, and what if there could be intelligent or machine intelligence ways of automating governance in the context of decentralized autonomous organizations.
That's a very unique angle to governance if you can pull that up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of that stuff is pretty far out. So let's talk a little bit about like the shout out segment. So like, to me, this is a very open segment, but if there's anyone who you've crossed paths with, who you think has been very helpful, people who you admire, or people who you haven't even met, anyone who you want to give a shout out to, it's an open segment. So, feel free to recognize someone.
Oh gosh, there is so many projects that I admire in the space. So the thing about crypto is there is so many super talented people doing groundbreaking work, and obviously we hear about the big successes, but there is a lot of people just playing with super ambitious ideas. You mentioned Sam from FTX. I think
Yep.
it's been undeniable what he has been able to do across many projects with FTX, with now with Serum, with Solana,
Brilliant.
taking DeFi to that protocol. I think what Compound did for DeFi and Uniswap did for DeFi is been. I mean, it triggered the entire momentum in the market. We use a lot of. I think what is happening with programmable and algorithmic stablecoins these days is fascinating. So we're big fans. And if there is a project that I been a fan of, and I talk to this team regularly. I think the guys from White Earn is been sort of an inspiration to us, and I know they get a lot of hate from the market and
Ha.
a lot of love at the same time. But I think what they're doing is very difficult to do, and they're out there, right, trying to do this in the public eye and exposed to hacks and things like that, which is very difficult. So I think they have opened the door to a brand new set of products in the space.
Tell us a little bit about your DeFi analytics, and what can you derive from having analytics over the DeFi segment.
Yeah, so again, IntoTheBlock having two divisions. We have in the analytics platform, we have a very large portfolio of indicators for DeFi protocols. Interestingly enough, a lot of those indicators were initially incubated as part of the Quant strategies that we were building, and we just retrofitted to make it available to a retail audience. So when you go there, you're going to find over 50 indicators for everything from traditional, very generic market indicators and even sub-segments of the market like lending or DEXs to very specific per protocol. So we have over 20 analytics for Compound, over 12 analytics for SushiSwap, Uniswap. A lot of those protocols today are clients of the platform. So the things that you can find, because everything is visible, are fascinating. Like for instance, we provide analytics that visualize a heat map about the price of gas. So you can see at what times of the day across a week is cheaper or more expensive to accumulate gas. You can see historical distribution of Ethereum fees and things like that. You can see borrow rates and lending rates across many lending protocols. So the arbitrage is like in front of you, like right there. If you go deeper into a protocol like Compound, we provide very visible metrics for things like liquidations that are in the protocol and are being used by bots all the time, but the analytics are not visible. So literally you can see day by day how many liquidations happen, or you can see the size of loans, like how many people are asking for loans for $10,000 or $100,000 or $1,000,000, right? And get an idea of how the behavior of the protocol. So again, because everything is on chain and everything is visible, you can extrapolate levels of intelligence that you can not do with any other asset class.
So a couple of things. So one of the things that's very interesting is that obviously analytic data is very prized and it's very exciting. Obviously there are kind of analytic dashboards like the Dune Analytics dashboard, and places to go to understand more about this space quantitatively. But I guess for me, like, how would users engage IntoTheBlock? How do users get access to DeFi analytics, and how do they get started?
So go to app IntoTheBlock.com, and today there is over 200 analytics and indicators there. Today we just released over 80 that compare crypto against traditional markets like vehicles like equity, stock, commodities, ETFs, and things like that. A large percentage of that is free, and there is a subset that is premium. At the moment, our entire DeFi section is free.
Wow.
This section about capital markets that I mentioned is free. And then we have some premium offerings for paying subscribers, but we're big fans of just democratizing access to this type of sophisticated analytics for everyone, whether it's for a small fee or whether it's completely free. The good thing about crypto is that we think whether you're a big hedge fund or a normal retail investor, you should have access to the right type of analysis.
I love it. So, that's your hot tip for the day. Go to app.intotheblock.com and you can get access to free DeFi analytics. It's absolutely impressive and it's very deep. And so, I think this is, and in a sense, this kind of baseline level of measurability and quantification is the raw materials that are being used to deliver trading strategies and machine learning to very sophisticated trading houses. So, I think that's a very exciting point. So I would say, one of the things that would be super interesting to understand is sort of your roadmap, right? So, now that you've built some of these really powerful analytic tools, and you've built this data, which is the analytic branch, and then you also have this quant trading strategies house. What's next on the roadmap? Like, what are you set to build next?
So, as I said today, we just did a release today, over 80 analytics that again given the current adoption of crypto, we're trying to provide some light into how crypto is placed in the context of traditional market vehicles. So whether you want to compare with Tesla or with new IPOs in the Renaissance IPO, ETF, or to gold and silver, or to oil and things like that, we provide a very large coverage of that, and that brings the portfolio of analytics of IntoTheBlock to over 200 indicators across 700 assets, processing over 30 terabytes of data. So it's a very large infrastructure. One thing that we're gonna do in the foreseeable future is we're gonna launch a series of products and services that brings the analytics that make it more personable to you. So in the sense that today we provide analytics that present a macro perspective of the market. So whether you're looking at it or I'm looking at it, it's the same type of indicator. We want to bring it, personalize it to your positions, to your portfolio, and provide analytics that are very relevant to you, your trading history, your current holdings, and also more actionable, something that will get you closer to making an investment, to making a trade, and to some extent sort of give you the exposure to what the sophisticated desks are doing, trying to massage it in a way that the normal retail guy could have access to it. It's a big lift, but we have been working on it for a while.
No, and you've been delivering software at a prolific rate, and obviously it's very exciting. You have tremendous distribution to almost every imaginable channel partner. So I think that it's been a good track record to date. So I guess to me, would love to kind of get any sort of final thoughts. Are there any questions that you'd like to be asked, or is there anything that I've missed, in terms of this conversation?
No, so one thing that you and I have this debate multiple times, and we receive this question every other day about what's the value of analytics and intelligence in this type of market, in an emerging market. And I always point people to the fact that there hasn't been a single asset class in history that got anywhere without intelligence, right? And crypto is not going to be the exception to that rule. So getting better indicators, better analytics, better intelligence about this asset class is not a luxury. It's sort of a requirement for this asset class to evolve and to go from where we're at today to the next $2, $3, $4 trillion in value, and with the big players getting in. So we think intelligence is one of the foundational building blocks of any modern asset class.
Do you have any take on this kind of oracles problem? Because I would say that, like, all intelligences continue to search for data sources, right? And of course, whenever an intelligence, whether it's machine or human, encounters a data source, it rightfully should be asking about the validity of the data source, right? And of course, you're talking primarily about on-chain data, but the thing I think that's potentially exciting is that when you have oracles, you can actually start to integrate on and off-chain data, right? And that could become available to your machine learning. So, I mean, how do you see the oracles problem, and do you kind of incorporate that into your product?
This is probably going to open the door to a larger discussion, but I actually been spending more time thinking about what areas we should really decentralize. Like I gone from being like 100% pro decentralization person to more thinking about, well, we're trying to decentralize a lot of things that do not need to be decentralized. And a lot of the information that we consume in the world, and if you want to go to markets, it's based on trust, and that's just a fact. I trust NASDAQ.
Yes.
With what they give me. You trust the scores on ESPN because it's a good source. So The oracles introduce a layer that is required to have the right authenticity and validation of information. But for certain sources, they also introduce the overhead of having to have consensus and things like that around the information. What that causes is that for a lot of protocols, the delays and the oracles become a performance bottleneck and are subject to all sorts of market manipulations. We saw what happened with DAI in Compound a few months ago, in which somebody was able to manipulate the oracle. So I don't have a solution to this problem, but I do believe that vision has to evolve a little bit. Like, not everything in life requires consensus. And that should not be the only way to access off-chain information on chain. Now, how do we solve that problem? I'm not 100% certain, but I believe that the mechanisms we have today are a little bit limited.
Yeah, that's a very good summary. I think we are kind of reached the end of the hour, so would love to kind of wrap up here. I think that is an incredibly juicy topic, and obviously you're welcome to come back anytime on the show, and we can kind of really continue.
It took me like 2 months to get you to invite me to this.
That's great. Well, let's get it scheduled, and we'll get this going. But this has been a tremendous show. Very, very deep topics, and it's always a great pleasure to see you. So let's do this again.
Thank you for having me. You do a great job. It's been a privilege to see you doing this podcast from the fences, and I'll be part of it.
Thanks so much. Okay. Bye bye.
Thank you.